I went to an Army recruiter and I wanted to be an officer in the infantry. And they said I couldn't do it because I was a female. And there's an Air Force recruiter next to him. And he said, hey, you want to be a pilot?
Hoy voy a hacer una entrevista, mi primera entrevista en inglés. Este no va a ser el final del contenido en español. Vamos a diversificar un poquito, pero esta persona que vamos a introducir es una piloto con muchos años de experiencia. Voló en la Fuerza Aérea, esos aviones jumbo, y tiene otra trayectoria aparte de ser piloto de la Fuerza Aérea. Y creo que es importante contar su historia. Así que por favor, denos su apoyo, traten de mirar la entrevista y ver la traducción en español. Y vamos a ver la entrevista con la Capitán Julie.
Julie, thank you so much for your time. Would you mind starting by describing your journey in this amazing aviation career of yours and what motivated you to become a pilot?
Oh, sure. Thanks for having me. I grew up in an Army family. I wanted to be in the Army. And in high school, I went to an Army recruiter and I wanted to be an officer in the infantry, serve my country that way. And they said I couldn't do it because I was a female. And it was the first time I'd ever been told I couldn't do something because I was a female. And I stood there in disbelief. I mean, I just didn't even know what to say. I was like, oh, because I'm a female, that's the only reason why I can't do this. And they're like,
Around what time was this?
1985.
Oh, okay.
And there's an Air Force recruiter next to him. And he said, hey, you want to be a pilot? And I had never thought about the Air Force or being a pilot. I was all Army. And I was so mad at the Army right then that I said, sure. There was a guardian angel that day because that was the best path I could have possibly been on. I have loved being a pilot every minute of every day that I've been a pilot, and I've been flying for about 35 years now. In college, my grandmother was like, are you sure you want to be a pilot? And so she paid for me to get my private license when I was in college. From college, I did ROTC in college, and then I went straight to the Air Force, and I flew the KC-10, the air refueling aircraft, which I loved. Went all over the world flying the KC-10. Loved the mission, loved the crew of it, loved the Air Force. A lot of people say, yeah, I want to be a pilot in the Air Force, and you have to want to be in the military first, and then the pilot comes second. Because if you don't like being in the military, you don't do it just to be a pilot. For personal reasons also, I decided to get out of active duty, and I went into the reserves and worked for the Air Force Academy, non-flying, and I got hired with JetBlue right away. So I came on with JetBlue, and my training date was in January of '03, and I've been here ever since.
A lot of our viewers, I'm sure they'll be very curious to know a little more about the KC-10.
Okay.
The concept of refueling an airplane
Yes.
in the air.
Yes.
How was that experience?
So the KC-10 is like a DC-10, big commercial airliner. And what they did is they took like the baggage areas and made fuel bladders out of that area. And then they just put on a refueling. It's like a big stick. We call it a boom. And then there's also another way where it's like a hose. And they just added that equipment on and kind of made it into a military refueling. It's like a gas station in the sky. And we refuel all different kinds of aircraft from all different countries, from Air Force, Navy. Every aircraft we refuel has a specific speed they refuel, altitude that's best for them to refuel. And like when fighters go over the oceans, they can't make it all by themselves, so we refuel them to make them over, if they're going to deploy over the oceans, things like that.
You were also involved with firefighting.
Yes. So when I got out of active duty and went and transitioned to the reserves, I came with JetBlue to do my flying. But when I retired from the reserves, I had this time in my life that I wasn't used to. I was like, what do I do with this time? Because I was very active in the reserves. One day I said, hey, I think it'd be fun to be a firefighter. And I was in my 40s, female, and I always thought fire was interesting. I always loved fire engines, fire trucks. I mean, fire engines and airplanes are just the coolest apparatuses. You can't go wrong with them, right? I went up to a firehouse. I said, hey, I know you have some volunteer firefighters. How do I do that? And he looked at me going, yeah, you want to do this? You're a 40-year-old woman, really? And I go, well, what do I need to do this? And I have a strong belief that if you have a vision and you keep that vision and you're dedicated to that vision and you're willing to, when you hit a wall, you find out what door can get you around that wall. And I want to be a firefighter. So he's like, oh, you should get a degree in fire technology. You need to go to all these classes. Oh, you need to become an EMT. You know, all these things. You have to take a physical, you have to take a medical. And the physical, by the way, is equal to all the other guys. Everybody's equal. It's not a female, male, not age. It's a physical.
You don't get a waiver.
No waiver. And I'm like, and I'm writing down, I'm like, got it. And I got a personal trainer because I was like, I'm not going to be that person. I want to be one of the, you know, at least in the middle of the pack, if not near the front. I became an EMT, did all that stuff, became a firefighter, a volunteer, did that for about a year, 2 years, and realized it was hard to be an airline pilot and do that because there's just so much training that you have to continually do. So then I looked into fire investigation and being a fire and arson investigator. And I also found out that being a private fire investigator is a lot more interesting than being one with the fire department.
Huh.
And I became a certified fire and explosion investigator. And I did that almost full time while I was flying. For about 8 years I did that. So it was very interesting.
Now, aside from being a pilot and that accomplished career of yours, you volunteer your time to a cause within our pilot union. Can you tell folks about what CIRP is?
CIRP, C-I-R-P, Critical Incident Response Program. Pilots, we're the point of the spear on the airplane. We're in charge of the airplane. And for us to be in a good mental spot when we're flying is incredibly important. In the past, pilots especially have just kind of pushed mental health down, saying, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And then going to fly, even though they're having these stress reactions that they don't understand. One thing that CIRP does, which is really good, is help make the pilot a safer pilot by understanding themselves better in their mental health and when they're good to fly, when they're maybe not good to fly, and then just understanding how to recover from a really hard day faster. Because we do have hard days as pilots.
The importance of maybe just having a dialogue. That doesn't mean that you are compromising yourself or you're unstable mentally. What would you tell those pilots that may have gone through an incident at work, the importance of having a conversation with one of our peers?
That's a great question. And that as pilots, we have almost been trained, and they're trying to lose this stigma, but we've been trained to, we don't feel. So if a pilot or someone who wants to be a pilot and is struggling is like, no, I can't admit any vulnerabilities, or they're going to think less of me, or I'm not going to lose my job, or, you know, I'm worse than everybody. That everybody has those thoughts. Every pilot, every human being has vulnerabilities. Yeah. Yes, and the stigma with pilots is we have a hard time expressing that to our friends, to our families, to our spouses. So that's one thing great with CIRP is pilots can reach out. We're totally confidential. We don't judge. The conversation a pilot has with a CRP peer pilot volunteer is just between them. No one else ever will know their conversation. And for pilots that don't have a CIRP program, or say student pilots, or someone who just wants to be a pilot, find some support, some person in your life that you feel comfortable just talking with. And just by talking the experience, and someone that you feel comfortable that's not gonna judge you, you know, I think talking is huge. And pilots, we need to do more of that in the world.
ALPA began teaching its first class of peer support volunteers in September 1994. 1 month later, Siemens Flight 4184 crashed, killing all 65 people on board. CIRP volunteers were called in to debrief accident investigators who had worked at the crash site.
Now, in closing, what would you tell that 10-year-old little girl that's watching you? Because I'm sure you went through different obstacles just for being a woman, and here you are with this amazing career.
I would say that, kind of going back to, if you have a vision, there's ways to make that vision happen. I had a general in the Air Force, chief of staff of the Air Force, actually tell me, you want to be a pilot? Because I had my little cadet wings in college. He's like, you want to be a pilot? And I was like, yes, sir. He's like, I don't know if girls should really fly. It was just him and I. And we were at this event, and my whole balloon went like this. And I was still on the path, so it didn't stop me, but it had an impact. Of course, times are different now than 40 years ago. This was 40 years ago, but you're still going to have obstacles. There's still people out there that don't think you should be in a man's world. Don't let those people stop you. Those people are just little, not even road bumps. They're just little rocks. You just walk around. You just ignore them. They're a rock. It's easier said than done. But just say, you know what? I'm not going to give you that power to affect me. I'm going to find another way around it. And there's ways to do things now, especially with the internet, globalization. Just keep that vision. So, okay, here's my wall. Where's a door? Let me find a way to get around this wall. Think of it as more as an obstacle, not as the end of your road.
Wow. Thank you so much for your time, and
my pleasure.
hope you enjoyed this short interview.
Yes, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, so here we go. My first interview in English with someone that I am privileged to call a friend. Soy el Capitán Rodríguez. Hasta la próxima.
I rule the world. I spend all my life to set you up to win. The whole 99 will be the 1%. All I need in this life is sin.